This is the at-home, isolated, socially distanced, quarantined, going delirious Coaching Life podcast. We're just messing with you. We're having a great time still, and we have a feeling we're going to be back on the field sometime soon. Back in ballparks everywhere. Yes, it might look differently. We might be doing things a little differently, but Pat and I are hopeful. We are being optimistic, and we tend to believe that we're on the downhill side of this thing. We're getting ready to get back to somewhat normal living, and so let's just keep our fingers crossed and our prayers going in that direction. We have a really, really, really great episode for you today. In fact, I had a feeling this was going to happen. We talked for so long with today's guest that we are going to make it a two-part series. So you're going to get the first half of this conversation today, and then we'll do the second half of the conversation in part two next Monday. Our guest today is Coach Fred Gibson, my high school baseball coaching mentor, a guy that I absolutely love, and it has been my goal ever since Pat and I began this podcast to have him on. And I am just so grateful that we had the chance to sit down for a couple of hours and just talk baseball with Gibby. It's episode number 53, and it starts right now. We have today as our guest on the Coaching Life podcast, Fred Gibson, mostly known in this part of the world that we call Ohio, Southeastern Ohio, and probably even beyond Southeastern Ohio as Gibby. And I had the pleasure of coaching with Gibby for 7 years at Athens High School. And I got to tell you, those were some of the most formative years of my coaching career. Coach Gibson spent 23 years as Athens High School's head baseball coach, and I don't even know how many years you assisted, Coach. Would you fill in that blank for me?
10 years.
So 33 years total at Athens High School as a baseball coach, but also 26 years as a basketball coach? Is that right?
18 years as a head coach, and I think 5 or 6 as an assistant coach, and then 1 year an assistant coach at Columbus South in basketball.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. And you had a year of track at Columbus South too.
4th and 5th and 6th grade coaches too.
Yeah. And Pat, Gibby coached track also.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I was really good at that.
Yeah.
I started to coach a junior high track team this spring. It was my first run at track coaching. So that's
you got
why
a couple weeks in. Up. Yeah. Well, when Gibby retired in the end of the 2012 season at Athens High School, retired from baseball, you'd been retired from teaching for a few years before that. He retired with a record of 337 and 199, won 7 conference titles, 4 district titles. And, if anyone were to ask somebody, I know several years ago, Athens Messenger wrote those articles, and I don't know if they're still doing them, but something about this is Athens, or I am Athens County, or whatever. If anyone were to write a book titled I Am Athens County, Coach Gibson's picture would have to be on the front cover of it. I mean, this is an Athens native, born, raised. He's been a Bulldog, a Bobcat, played baseball and basketball at Ohio University. And
played 1 year. Year of basketball.
Okay, 1 year. I knew the basketball was limited. I just couldn't remember if it was 1 or 2 years. In addition to high school ball, I know this because I've heard the stories. Some of Gibby's fondest memories as a coach, I would guess, are as a youth baseball coach, which is what we do a lot of discussion about here on this podcast. He had the privilege of experiencing the dream of every kid and every coach, I think, which is a World Series, a Little League Senior Division World Series in 1987. And they've even done recently, Nelsonville TV Cable has done a documentary on this World Series. And we'll be sure to put the link in the show notes, and we'll talk about it here as well so that people will know. I sat and watched that one afternoon, and I was just enthralled. It was incredible. It's about an hour and a half long, and it's called One Magical Summer. And it's just amazing to me in 1987, the amount of video footage that they were able to capture of that entire, experience. So I have to say this, that thrill ride, I'm sure for Coach Gibson in that year and the years leading up to that as well, it provided a lot of stories, Pat, on our high school bus trips. I'd say 7 years worth of bus trips. I heard, I probably didn't hear every story. I know I heard some 2 or 3 times, but I can't wait to talk about some of those here on this podcast. But one of the things that we did after the 2012 season at Athens High School, I had the privilege of taking over a program that was, needless to say, in incredible hands already, had an incredible culture, was built very strong. So it was one of the easiest coaching jobs I ever had to do after someone else. But one of the first things that we decided to do in 2013 was invite Coach Gibson and his lovely, supportive wife, Pat, out to Rano Field and throw out the first pitch. And that night,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and that night we retired jersey number 25, put it in a big frame and gave it to him, and it was a well-deserving honor, and it's just an absolute understatement to say that it was the least that I could do to express my appreciation, my gratitude, and my love for this man and his mentorship. Wow, sorry, Coach. I didn't know I was going to get choked up saying that. I don't know if I've ever met a person who is more focused on being others focused and more supportive of youth and high school athletes than the person we have on our podcast today. And so this is the heart of what the coaching life is about. And so it's our great honor to welcome into the show Fred Gibson. Gibby. Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that day when you did that to me.
Okay, let's do that.
Down there to throw out the first pitch. And I warmed up. And then all of a sudden you started doing all this stuff with the uniform and saying nice things. And I threw the ball to the backstop. Wasn't even close to the catcher. I was a little embarrassed, but it's okay.
It'd been a few years.
To the backstop.
It made it to the backstop easy, but it was about 6 foot to the left of the catcher.
Well, what we should have done was stick an L screen out there and you'd have been just fine.
That's right.
That was the problem.
No doubt. Yeah, we can pitch pretty good from about 35 feet away with no catcher.
That's right.
That's definitely my range.
In coaching, you're going to throw a lot of batting practice.
No doubt. Well, Pat, I'm going to let you open the questioning because I think one of the easiest thing we could do is just toss Gibby the mic and say, here, go ahead and talk, and we'll sit back for 3 or 4 hours and record. But I know that you've got a few things you want to ask him too.
So how long is the podcast here?
We can honestly make it as long as we want, and like I said, I'll make
about 6 or 7 hours.
We'll make it a 2 or 3 parter if we have to, Coach.
Did you see the article in the paper where the coach or the guy said, I've got all these stories and I'm going to put them on a piece of paper, and then all I have to do is say it's number 3 and you all laugh. I think that was me. I'm thinking about doing that.
There you go.
But no, I think it's, for the time that we're living in right now, I want to get your perspective that is relevant to the situation that we're kind of going through. And I'm just wondering if, in the experience that you had through all the years, if you have ever went through anything like we're going through right now with, the COVID-19 pandemic and, the interruption that it's caused on such a huge scale with youth and amateur sports and primarily baseball specifically, if you have any thoughts about that.
The only thing close to this is one time in the winter coaching basketball, we had to switch gyms because they were having an energy problem. Snow would cancel a game or two. But that's got nothing to do like this. This is going to just be devastating. And I coached from 1969 till 2012. And I never saw anything like this. There's never been a time when I thought baseball would be called off or football would be called off. Wait till the South finds out they can't play football next year down in Clemson, Georgia, LSU. There will We will have the second Civil War. They will secede from the Union so they can play football. And I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's, you see this conversation on Twitter a lot of, it's so polarizing. People, I don't know how it starts, but someone will say, this league is canceled or this team is canceling their games. And, someone below will respond to that post and say, this is insane. We should be playing baseball. And then someone will respond to that and say, well, it's just baseball. I don't think people understand. They really, unless you're attached to it, unless you do it on a daily basis, I don't think people have really any idea how important sports are to people and how big of an impact this is having on individuals throughout our country. I don't think they can comprehend it. I know that from the way they respond to it. To tell someone it's just a game or it's just baseball, it's not really that important. It's a way of life. It's our way of life, and it heavily impacts us.
I know when my granddaughter, who's a sophomore, was going to play softball this year, and that all got canceled. Coach can tell you about that.
Yeah.
She wrote a letter or a journal that Coach Bissell's been putting on, and the feeling she had when she hurt her hip and she thought she wasn't going to be able to ever play again. When she found out she could, the relief and everything, because she just loves to play. And all these kids just love to play. And it comes down to, okay, what are we doing to those kids, not allowing them to play when they're probably the least amount of people that could possibly be affected by all this? I could be affected by it, and maybe you guys, I don't know. But the kids seem to be able to fight this thing off. You don't have very many cases of kids getting it. But I think they sold this to me by saying, well, this could really kill you, but it could really affect your grandkids too. Well, I don't know whether dads will say that. And these kids are being denied a chance to participate in sports. And for a lot of them, it's the biggest part of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. For a lot of them, it's sadly, Coach and I talk about the difference between unorganized and organized baseball a lot, or, sports or structured and unstructured play. But, sadly, a lot of kids throughout the country, this is the only opportunity they have of a structured environment.
Yeah.
And, from a individual development perspective, not having this opportunity, man, it's having a very negative impact on them. And, as a result, that's impacting the future of our country and of our world. That's a scary thing to comprehend.
You guys are probably too young to remember this, but when I was a kid, we played all day long. Mm-hmm. And then we went home and got something to eat, and then we went to Little League games.
Right.
Which lasted right? And they said, well, this would be too much for them. Not after you played all day long. That's all we did. We just went over to the ball field. We played all summer long, every day. And then when it got to be basketball season, you played basketball the whole time. When it was baseball, you played baseball. And some people played football. Crazy people played football. I was a quarterback up through the 8th grade and said, this is not my sport. But the structured part, I think, really comes down to if you're around an adult that really cares to make you a better player, that's a great thing. If you're around somebody that's just out there putting in some time and farting around, then I think you do a disservice to the kid. Our best players that we've had in Athens, and you can look at this. Bill Waddell was the head baseball coach before me. And, well, I was his assistant. There were some other guys in between, but he and I both started Pee Wee League teams. I had 24, he had 20. He had to play 2 innings and 4 innings. It's not possible for me to get 24 kids in for 2 innings piece and 4 innings. But finally, I convinced the kids, but I couldn't convince the parents, but because they were dumb. But
they're crazy.
We talk about that a lot.
It's crazy. So then that group of kids, when they got up, that was the DeCaminatas and the Stricklands and the Corrigans and those guys that won the World Series. They had people with them, Dave Strickland and different people who really understood coaching. They got to be there. Now, Chris went back down, and he went down to that lower level and started working with these kids. And lo and behold, they make it to the regional. How many times, Coach?
2 years in a row. Yeah, regional final 2 years. And yeah. And then last year's team, so they skipped a year, and then Todd's second year here, they won the district last year. Yeah.
And that's because they'd had people coaching them all the way up through that knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how teams can actually function without that, having to bring those kids along, because you don't just get them in high school and say, okay, here we go. I'm going to turn you guys into really something. They have to start playing when they're younger, and they have to be taught the right way to do things and how to do them and how to field. And without that, and right now I saw that today where Sandlot is waiting on the governor to give them an okay to be able to have Sandlot baseball this year. Mm-hmm. We could kill Sandlot baseball in 1 year.
Yeah.
By not playing, you're saying?
Sure, you go for 2 years and the kids will stop playing.
Yeah, that's the truth.
I'll be on that video game the whole day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can attest to that. Definitely. Do you think
if I had some kind of philosophy that other than, the philosophy is you write down and you make sure that the school knows what you're doing, is that the younger they can be taught correctly, the better off you are as a head coach when they get to you.
Yeah.
Coach did it. I did it. Coach Waddell did it. They went down and said, how do we do this? And the only way we thought we could do it was to actually do it ourselves. And of course we had kids, and you're probably doing the same thing with your kids. You're trying to make sure that they have somebody that understands the game so that they can maybe, not everybody turns out to be a good baseball player.
Right.
Good baseball players don't just show up when they get to high school.
Yeah.
All the success we have, I think, you have to give credit to the people that worked with them down below. And if that happens to be us, that's even better.
Yeah, that's so true. Coach, that class of 1989 and 1990 was the group of kids that were on your 1987 team. When did they actually start playing with you? They was younger than that, right? I mean, you had some talent on that team and some kids, some families, just good people. One of those kids is now a top SEC baseball coach in Scott Strickland at Georgia and played professional ball. Corey Corrigan played professional ball. How many of those guys went on to play Division I college baseball and then on to professional ball?
I'm up to 4.
A little Athens Little League team.
Division I baseball players right during that one time, which for Athens County, that's an amazing amount of people.
Yes, it is.
But they put that league together in 1986 to go with the Williamsport Little League. And that team, we had a Little League team that was filled with Scott Strickland and Corey Corrigan and Kevin Skurlock. And, oh, my God, we had so many good players. It was unbelievable. And they won the state championship the very first year. The next year, our Little League team, I started working with them, and Larry Corrigan and I, and we made it to the district finals, but that was it. The next year, they went all the way to the World Series as 13-year-olds, while the other group with Corrigan and Strickland, they went all the way to the regional finals. And so then we put those two teams together the next year, and Don Skurlock and I got to coach that team, and we won the whole thing. But, big difference between we came in second as 13-year-olds and everybody patted us on the back and said, well, maybe next year. You're going, what? We made it to the World Series. Thing. Yeah, well, you do.
Yeah.
But the next year we had parades. My God, we had proclamations. We thought, and actually we won one more game. But
wow,
it's a big difference between first and second in this country.
Yes, there is. And
But
Man,
we
what a
had so
thought.
many of those same kids that just kept moving up. And that group, after winning in 87, and the 86 group made it back to the regionals the next year, which was 88. They made it all the way to the regional finals. Thought we were going to the World Series again. Coach, that group, we put those two groups together and won the state Legion championship in 1990. So, yeah, that was quite a group of kids, and we had a lot of support.
Yeah, every now and then you have a class like that, or you have like 2 or 3 classes, because that's what it takes, really. A couple, about 2 or 3 high school class, what are going to be high school classes together, just all the way through. That's what we saw here in Athens with Joe Burrow and his classmates, where a ton of those kids went on to play Division I football as well, and everyone in the world knows Joe now, of course, which is just surreal.
Yeah.
But those times that you had on that Little League ride are some of the, I remember some of the stories, and I wasn't even there. The way you tell those stories, Coach, about, just standing in line to get a cheeseburger in Williamsport or wherever it was you were at that time, those kinds of things are just some of the things that I think it just captures what the whole Little League baseball experience is. Because a few of the stories you told actually were of the games. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. I love to tell stories. And, it's, you're down in Kissimmee, Florida at the Houston Astros spring training headquarters, and you're playing on their field, and you're staying at places, and you get to go to Disney World because they're going to take you for free. It's so hot that the kids want back out of there. It was just, 11 o'clock, Coach, get us back out of here. It's too hot. And that took a little bit of doing to get those buses back and pick us up. And the team that we eventually beat twice, they stayed not only that day, they stayed the whole next day out in that heat. But they were from Florida, so they were probably used to it. But, we beat a pitcher that made it all the way to AAA. Of course, we had a pitcher that made it all the way to AA. Yeah. So, and they pitched against each other in one of the greatest games I think I've ever seen. And then we just kicked the snot out of them in the second game, and it was kind of anticlimactic until they dumped the Gatorade on me, and then that was a big chunk of ice on my back. But, yeah, I've told the stories over and over and over and over, and probably some of them have changed throughout the years.
Well, you know how that happens.
Always to make myself look better.
That's right.
Coach, when someone mentions the 1987 national championship, Little League Senior Division national championship, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
One of the great things was Taiwan was there, and they had won the Little League World Series in 3 years before that. And this was 14 and 15-year-olds. And when a kid made an error, 2 of them made errors the day before and they lost, they had to stand in the corner the whole entire game with no players allowed to speak to them.
Oh, my God.
We did that now in the United States. We'd have been in jail.
You never, yeah, exactly.
That was amazing. But when Scott Strickland's catcher's mitt broke, the only team that offered to give us their spare catcher's mitt was Taiwan.
Wow.
It was a piece of rag. It really was. He managed to get Scott's glove fixed, thank God, because he couldn't have caught in that thing. But you can see that they were well drilled, and they had played together as a team all the way through, where we had to pick the all-star team after the regular season was over, and then we started playing. So they were quite an advantage for winning all those games in all those years. There's reasons why the United States has trouble beating some of the teams from foreign countries, because they actually push teams together and leave them together.
Absolutely.
Right. They're
Makes
playing
a huge
ball.
difference, both from playing together from a chemistry perspective and knowing how to manage that team from a coaching perspective.
No doubt. They learned the same things.
A lot of it had to do with air bases that we wanted to have in their countries. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was said many times.
I'll be darned. They're playing ball in Taiwan right now.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they are.
Yeah, they started a few weeks ago. with empty stadiums.
Is that the minor league team, or is that the kids playing?
No, it's the professionals. Have you seen any of those? Any of that?
Didn't they put stuff in the stands that made them look like people?
Cardboard dummies, I think. Yeah.
Is that what they did?
Yeah. To make it look like there were people there. They didn't make any noise. They may have piped. I don't know. They may have piped sound in. I haven't actually watched any of the games, but I've seen some friends of mine that are on Twitter, some coaching friends who've said, "Hey, I just watched a game on this." You have to watch them at 3 a.m. because it's the whole, that's when they're playing according to our time. But yeah, at least there's some baseball on somewhere. Maybe we'll get to see some.
Yeah, I remember as 13-year-olds, we were playing Puerto Rico, and Scott DeCaminato was pitching, and they had no chance against him. And the next thing you know, they're all hunkered down to where their knees and their shoulders are almost touching.
Yes.
And he threw a pitch, and the umpire called a ball, and I said, you're down like that, you have to call every pitch a strike till they stand back up. Well, then
Amen.
He started calling strikes. Well, then a foul ball hit the umpire, and I know the idea of kill the umpire is out there, but they were cheering because he got hurt.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, wow.
Puerto Rico was.
I know there's a difference in cultures.
Yeah.
I know that. Yeah. But they really did mean they hated the umpire.
Hey, there was a kid.
Coach, we know we never argue with the umpires. We just accept what they said. Yeah,
that's right. Coach, there was a kid in this year's Little League World Series this past year who did that. Did you watch that? There's a lot of press about that kid and a lot of anger, I think, pointed toward this 12-year-old kid. But he did he would every now and then just squat down like a catcher in the batter's box. And of course there were a lot of tweets about, how he would be wearing one if if I were pitching and all this. So.
My thing on that is though, it's a natural stance. The strike zone is established with a natural stance of the batter's box. So he's basically just taking himself out of position to swing the bat. And I agree with Coach Gibson that, as an umpire, you have to call it a strike.
Yeah.
At that point, you even widen it because you're guessing at that point. I think you have to give benefit of the doubt to the pitcher.
If he threw it, I wanted it to be a strike. Because Scott, at that age, ended up pitching for High University. He could throw strikes. So, but when you only got a 6-inch strike zone, that's
it's a little different. Yeah. And we know some umps that have that big of a strike zone, 6-inch strike zone. In fact, Pat, one thing I forgot to mention in the introduction of Gibby was he might be the only coach that I've ever met or have ever seen coach the game of baseball that could literally say anything he wanted to an umpire and not get thrown out of the game. I don't know if that's something that comes with age or, by the time I coached with you, this was the case, but there were times when I was dying laughing inside that dugout. I had to turn around because I thought he'll throw me out for laughing before he'll throw coach out for some of the things he's saying to him.
How do you establish that, Coach? How do you get to that point?
I really know. I knew when to stop.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
I never knew when not to start. That was. I think I learned that from Bill Waddell when he told one umpire. The umpire said, "Well, the catcher stood up. I couldn't see the pitch," and he said, "He's 5'10" and you're 6'4". You look like an elephant on a gnat's behind." I just cleaned that up for our podcast. And the umpire turned, and I had to step in front of Bill to keep him from getting thrown out. So I learned that from him, I think. He told an umpire one time, he was arguing with the home plate umpire about something, and the first base umpire came over and said, you just need to coach and let him umpire. And he said, if your ears were half as good, your eyes were half as good as your ears, you'd be a great umpire.
Yeah.
He got thrown out.
I wrote these down. Yeah. I have a whole journal book full of comebacks that I've written down, Coach, just from 7 years I used a few of them. Coach, I remember one story you told me about. This must have been one of the years that you guys made it to a regional or something, but then lost. you told me about how swiftly, and I didn't know what this was like. We had a similar experience when I took a team to the American Legion State Tournament and we were eliminated from it. They basically met us as soon as we shook hands with the other team and said, turn in your keys and we'll see you. We'll see you next year, hopefully. And they couldn't wait to kick us out of the dorm here at Ohio University, which is where that tournament was. But didn't you say you were talking about a similar experience where they were trying to get you guys on a plane or something? I vaguely remember a story like this after you had lost a game there.
Yeah, we were playing a team from Wisconsin, and we'd already lost one game in a regional tournament after winning the state championship in 1990. And we got rained out the night before in about the 6th inning, and we had to come back. And so we're playing, and the team we're going to have to play, and we knew pretty much we were going to lose because we were down 8-0 at the time to the eventual team that went all the way to the World Series. Mm-hmm. So we lose, and I'm standing around in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and it's time for a cheeseburger. That's the cheeseburger story.
Okay.
I'm standing in line. All of a sudden, they come and they said, "We need to see you up in the main office." And I went, "I've been standing in line for a cheeseburger now for about 10 minutes. Tell them I'll be up as soon as I get my cheeseburger." Well, what are they going to do to me, right? Pretty soon, I get my cheeseburger. They're back down there. He said he wants to see you right now. Now, this is the regional guy. He's the guy that's running the whole term. And so I go up, and he said, "We're going to send you home at 12 o'clock. And I said, "Okay." Now, it's about 5 right then. And so I said, "All right." And he said, "Now, this isn't going to be a problem, is it?" And I said, "No, I don't think this is a problem. The guys, was almost a fight. Guys were chasing each other because they just about killed Corey Corrigan on a pop-up. He came in to catch it, and the guy just drilled him, went clear out into the grass and just clobbered him. And chaos."
Wow.
Yeah, so here's a guy that ended up making double-A baseball in the pros, and he gets drilled, and his brother's running around with a bat looking for the guy that hit him. We're thinking, oh my God. So I said, "No, that shouldn't be a problem." And he said, "So you don't mind flying at midnight?" And I went, "Midnight? You're going to fly us out of here at midnight?" And he said, "Well, yeah." And I said, "You thinking we're going to have a fight with that group?" I said, "If there was going to be a fight, it would have already happened. You already said the guy is suspended for the rest of the tournament. Why would we fight him?" "Well, we just thought you might." I said, "Listen, if you're running out of money and you need for us to pay for our rooms," this is where he really got mad. I said, we can pull this off." And he went, "It's not about the money." Well, I think it is about the money, right, Coach? It's always about the money. That's why they wanted you guys to leave as soon as possible.
That's right.
And I said, "I'll tell you what, we can do it." And he said, "All right, get out." So I went down. By that time, I was hungry again. I went and got in line for another cheeseburger. I get the call, "Go back up." This time I just went back up. He said, "All right, you're leaving tomorrow at noon, but you have to come to the games in the morning because the hotel doesn't want you there because you'll be too disruptive."
Oh, gosh.
Wow.
Excuse me? Well, that night it went from being 75 degrees in the daytime to the next morning it's 40. And we got shorts, T-shirts, the whole bit. No coats. So we're all sitting at the game later on. But before we walk out the door, the guy from the hotel calls me and says, "Why don't you guys just stay here? You've been such good people.
Yeah.
You can just stay here the whole time." And I said,
"Man,
I'd love to do that." So I called the guy and he said, "No, you have to come here." So see, I thought I had won, but I'd actually lost.
Right.
So we had to go sit in the cold because the guy was a turd. But we got everywhere that group ever went, from the time they were 13-year-olds to the time we were. Everybody told us how great our kids acted. And here it says, "We got to get you out of here because you're going to disrupt the whole place and you're going to tear things up."
Well, it's true too, because look at how many just the characters they've become as adults. Look at the professionals that they are right now. Many of which
one's the CEO at the OU Credit Union. One's a baseball coach down at Georgia. And that whole team was filled with those people.
Yeah.
You could go right down the list and talk about it. And we see that kind of kid coming off of your teams there at the end. I mean, that's the ones I remember.
Right.
Those kids coming out, and they're just wonderful kids. And trying to get back into baseball. Castler's trying to get back into baseball.
Yep.
You showed me a lot because I really didn't think you could win with a lot of guys that were kind of large.
Wow, that team was large. Here's what
I always thought you'd be slim and could really run, but by golly, you made it all the way to the regional.
We knew what we had.
By golly, they could hit.
They could hit. We knew what we had when they were 12. When we showed up to tournaments and everyone asks for our birth certificates because the kids were so huge. And we knew they couldn't run. They were all slow as molasses. And so what we decided to do was we just taught them. We basically made it okay to try to swing for the fence. And you know how people used to always say, "Oh, just base hits is all you need. Hit the ball on the ground, whatever." We said, "No, we don't want you to hit on the ground. We want you to swing it for the fence." And so they at that early age, they all just became bombers, And so we just kind of kept that philosophy through high school. You would not believe the look on Brody Rogers' face, Coach. And this kid's 6'7" and 300 pounds. When I came up to him his senior year and said, "Hey, Brody, this is what I want you to do. Every time you step in the box this year, I want you to try to hit a home run." And his face lit up. He said, "Even with like 2 strikes?" I said, "I don't care what the count is. That's your goal, is to hit us a home run." Because if he did anything else, he was just going to ground out or pop out. And if that sucker hit a ground ball, they could throw him out from left field. So we didn't want him to hit a ground ball. So.
That's awesome.
I did get to coach a team that was like that. When we were little leaguers, we were just decent. We went to be in 13-year-olds, and you always know that you're going to run into a team that's bigger than you and stronger. We were that team that year. All of a sudden, these kids they were all saying, "You sure these kids are 13?" I said, "Some of them are 12." Yeah. They turned 13 during the season. So, I know that one, but they were tall and thin.
Yeah.
And that wasn't what Coach won with. They were not tall and thin. They were tall and big.
Oh, yeah. They were beefy. We had, our toughest decisions were, when we pitched a certain guy, we had to make sure that somebody played third base that could charge a bunt, because we knew if we had, because we knew we had a big first baseman. We knew that, that we had options at third that weren't very fast either. If we were slow at all 3 of those positions, they'd bunt us to death if they figured it out. If they figured out they could just lay it on the ground and beat it out every time. But fortunately, we actually thought when we went into the game against Waverly in the regional semifinal in 2016, we assumed that was going to be the game plan that Coach Noble would have, because they did it anyway. And all of a sudden we show up and they're swinging the bats. And so we ended up bunting, I think, more than they did that game with that group with 200 pounders, too. So, yeah.
We had to repair the baselines after that season, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Had to get new bags, everything. So that's right.
Remember, one of them got thrown out at second base on the ball that hit the left center field fence. I didn't think that was possible, but it did.
We didn't have very many triples. So that's for sure. Not very many triples.
By golly, they could play, and they understood how to play.
Yeah.
And I've always felt, and if I ever had anything that was really good, was I always thought that the team that could concentrate the longest in a game, because 7 innings, time to stand around on the sideline. If you could continue to concentrate on the game, know the situations all the time. It's what Coach Wren just hammered into us. If he turned to you and said, "What's the count and what should happen?" you better be able to tell him.
Yeah.
I didn't get to play enough not to be I wasn't the guy on the field. I was the guy standing there near him. And he would say, "What's the count? Don't look at the board. What's the count?" By God, you better be able to tell him. And or you were never getting in a game. And
yeah, I remember some of your Coach Wren stories, particularly ones of standing next to him. Didn't he actually encourage you to coach by teaching you a lesson during the game, even about coaching?
Yeah. I was up the bat Tom Murphy was the pitcher who went all the way to Milwaukee and played for the Milwaukee Braves for a while. I think it was back then, it was the Milwaukee Braves. And he threw about 90 miles an hour, and he threw one at my head in an inter squad game, and I went down, and the umpire, we always had umpires. Mm-hmm. And the guy says, strike one, and I get up off the ground. I said, I got to be strike one. And right in my head, he said, how would you know? Your eyes were closed and you were around. Well, he winks at me, the pitcher, and I'm thinking, okay, what's this mean? Well, I'm hoping it's a changeup, and it is, and I get a base hit. And Coach Wren says, Gibby, nice hit. Tom, never throw a weak hitter an off-speed pitch. Honest to God, that's what he said.
Oh, man.
Hey, Gibby, no offense. No offense, Coach, I got it. So when I did play, it was on defense. But I did get a base hit one time because I could bunt.
You know, that
base hit got me a nice trip to Notre Dame, got me a chance to play there too. So,
hey, nice.
You know, it's
you never know.
I always said that. Never throw an off-speed pitch to a poor hitter.
Yes, you did.
Hit a fastball, just throw it by him.
I'll tell you, that's one of the lessons, Coach, that I after hearing you say that so much, and of course I was your pitching coach when I came on as an assistant, and that was something that I drilled into our catchers. You know, when we let our catchers, call their own pitches, I said, remember this. You can tell when a guy is the only pitch a weak hitter is going to be able to hit is something slower. If we got a guy that can throw it by him, just stick with the fastball. Forget about the curveball, Ricky. Give him the heater.
Absolutely.
That when Chris came on, asked me if he could help me. I felt peed my pants. I thought, well, you betcha, because I had seen him coach down at the Maigs Legion team and knew all about his pitching in college and everything. And I just said, listen, you're in charge of pitching. I don't want to talk to the pitchers unless I have to go out and tell them to get their head out of their butt. I don't want to tell them about what they should be doing. I don't want to tell them exactly what to do. I said, that's your job. I go out and rip them. and had to a few times, but maybe I didn't have to. That I always felt better when I did.
Oh, yeah.
But if you can trust the guy that is working alongside of you, that is a big, big deal. And I was blessed to have Chris, and I was blessed to have Les Champlin. And I knew that those guys wanted what we wanted. We wanted the kids to act like they had some sense, to do what they're supposed to do, and teach them what you know. Mm-hmm. And that's a big deal. That trust factor is huge, because if you don't trust the guy that's working with you, and I had to tell one guy when he said, you need to get this guy to come in and help you with basketball. I said, I have to be able to trust the guy before I hire him. That made him mad.
Yeah.
But you do your homework, and you know who you want around you, and then you go for it. And then you can't say, listen, I don't really care what you think. Just do it my way. So Chris just took over the pitching like nobody's business, and I never had to worry about it again.
Yeah, I hear you on that. We actually did a podcast episode. It seems like years ago now, Coach, but we talked about, assistant coaches and some of the valuable traits that assistant coaches have, and that relationship between the head coach and the assistant coach was something we talked about. It. It's definitely really important for a team to be able to have coaches that can communicate effectively with one another. And a lot of that has to do with trust, because, you don't want someone that's always going to agree with you, but at the same time, you can't have someone that's always disagreeing with you either. But coaches, pitching knowledge and capability has been validated recently. We had a men's baseball tournament in Middleport, Ohio last fall, and Coach threw in the semifinal game. And everyone that I talked to after that came away and said, man, Chris looked really good throwing out there on the mound. So it was a good experience.
You got me blushing over here.
Yeah. Well,
that's what they said.
Coach Bradford from down at Warren has been after me for 2 years now to get a team together to go down there and play in his Labor Day tournament. And I think
What is
that'd
it?
be a wonderful thing. He doesn't want me to play. He's smart enough to know that I'm too old. But he wants me to get a hold of Chris and Chris Hewitt and all the guys. We could probably come up with a pretty darn good team.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got like 8 or 10 teams that have signed up now to play. So could be a lot of fun.
Are they playing out there at Warren High School?
No, they're going to play it there at the Civitan Park in Belfry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think they have a Belpre League every summer. I think there's a men's league in Belpre. Yeah.
So I think they had a team from, several teams from West Virginia now, and got a team from over near Warren, probably Waterford. It's not called Warren because it's just like in the old days. All the teams, all the towns had teams.
Yeah.
I played on a team here in Athens County, and we played Cutler, and we played everywhere. That's the kind of deal it is. And if you can get a group together, I'm sure he'd be thrilled. He had a stroke and it really affected his walking and everything, but he's still trying to put things together because once you're a baseball coach, it's a sickness. And you're always a baseball coach.
Yeah, that's the truth. Athens and Warren have had some incredible battles throughout the years in two sports, really, in baseball and in basketball. And some of those, I think the friendship that you and Coach Bradford have just in the, I don't know how deep of a friendship it is. And I guess the level of rival that we are when we're on the field and the ability to have a friendship off the field, or to be, I guess, cordial off the field is an example of something that baseball does. I mean, we had a Coach Chaffin from Nashville, Tennessee, or from Cooksville, Tennessee on last week. And it's one of the things we talked about, Coach, is that you could be bitter rivals and just absolutely hate each other in baseball. But there's something about the baseball coaching community that's just a little different in terms of the relationships that are there, the fraternity of coaches.
Yeah, there's no doubt. When he got thrown out in a tournament game, when we played down there, and we won that game. And the next year, we were supposed to play in the very first game of the season. And when we get there, it's pouring down rain. And then water coming down off the hill and everything. And the umpire said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "Well, we're going to call this game off so that we can play this game when Coach Bradford can be here, because I like beating him." And Bradford, he's within here. And they said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, who wants to play in the mud out here?" And besides that, I like to play when he's coaching. And maybe that went a long way. And he calls me at least twice a week.
Is that right?
Yeah, I've been to his house. He's got it set up like a Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame, and only been there once. And he keeps inviting me down for, like the things that they have for him at different bars and different things.
Uh-huh.
And since I don't drink, going to a bar is not way up there for me. But if they got good food, I'm
yes,
there.
they do. Yeah, yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that you have. I don't know whether I developed that with a lot of coaches, but Coach Wright, when he was at Jackson, and then he went over to Oak Hill, and those kind of relationships have really been good, and I'm sure you developed those same things. And some we get along with better than others.
You're not kidding.
One guy told me, "You want a piece of me?" down at Wellston. We probably didn't become close friends, but that's when I went out and told the umpire when we threw the guy out by about 6 feet, they're trying to win and we're trying to win, and really would appreciate if you pay attention. That's when I came back and told Chris, "I don't know how I'm still in the game."
Yes.
And all he said to me is, "Go back to the dugout, Coach."
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. I should have been thrown out many times.
Yeah, it's quite a testimony to be able to say. I'm not sure that you never got thrown out when I was with you, ever.
No, I never did. Yeah. I got thrown out of one Legion game. Todd Newsom's brother was umpiring. He come up from Florida, and the throw from the outfield was high. The kid came down, and it was it was a forced play. And all I said was over and over and over, did we come down on the plate before he got there? Well, he just didn't want to talk to me. He finally threw me out. When I went back to the dugout, the kid said, Coach, catcher didn't catch the ball. I said, what? They said the ball was laying behind the catcher, went off the top of his glove and landed behind it. So I got thrown out for stupid.
I'll be darned. You would think you would have mentioned that. Sit down, Coach. You didn't even catch the ball.
Before I got thrown out of the game, that's for sure. Maybe my assistant could have come out, but Chris would have.
That's right. I'd have been there.
I don't know who the assistant was.
We'd have been there. We'd have been there. We'd have been right behind you like we were that time when we played Lorraine.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I remember playing them. That was...
well, we may as well talk about it.
Yeah, we got to hear this. Like, don't hold me in the dark.
Sure. They were really good.
Oh, yeah. They were Division I. Big school.
Well, we're going to have the sheriff, because they were talking to some of our girls that were up in the stands. And was it Mitch Ryder that wanted to take on their whole team?
Mitch was ready to take on the whole team. He had his shirt off and everything. He was ready to roll.
And all he said to them was, get out. And they said, can we bring the bus down? No. Get out, get on the bus, and go back to Cleveland.
Yeah, the game was...
we're calling the sheriff.
The game was pretty contested throughout the game, and we actually went to extra innings. It was supposed to be... They showed up, and they were already ticked because they thought they were playing 2 games. And we said, no, this is a school night for us. They were on spring break, and they were taking a big trip. And you said, no, this is a school night for us. So as soon as their coach gets off the bus, he's already griping about having to play. He brought his JV and varsity team down, so they filled up their dugout, plus they sat outside the dugout. They had so many kids over there. And we played one game, and he said, well, how about a 9-inning game? And you're like, no, it's a regular 7-inning game. Well, we ended up going 9 anyway, I think, because we went to extra innings with them. And then they won on a play at the plate, I think. It was a bottom of the 9th. And we had a guy hit a base hit, runner on second, and you sent him around, and it was a throw, bang, bang at the plate, called out, would have tied the game, and that was it. So then it was already, everybody's being kind of, the adrenaline's pumping as we go through the line, and something started there in the line. And then when they decided to leave, they were actually going to come across the field and walk through our dugout to exit the stadium. You remember? And that's where you stepped out there and said, no, you're going around like every other team that plays here at Randall Field does. You're going around behind the stadium. And they just, that's when things got really testy. Yeah. Guys,
I have a story, and you probably, neither of you probably knew. Well, Coach Stewart, you weren't helping at the time, but I remember, Coach Dave Fetty, Coach Gibson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I graduated in 1999, Coach. And I remember 1998, we were scheduled to come to Athens at Meggs. I graduated from Meggs, and we were scheduled to come to Athens and play in a doubleheader. Well, it was the night of prom for Meggs. Okay. So we decided to not have a doubleheader. We were just going to have one game. All right. And you guys were beating us pretty good early in the game. And I don't remember why, because I don't think you normally do, but for whatever reason, we got really upset with each other. The teams started bickering back and forth, and we're hollering at each other. And, Meggs got fired up, and we made a run, and we came back, and we tied the game, and we went into extra innings. And so the reason I remember this so well is because my high school sweetheart at the time, which is now my wife, was waiting on me to come back to get ready to go, for prom festivity. And all of us, Meggs, we're in that same boat. We had people waiting on us to come back to do prom, and, they're getting anxious and angry. But we were so fired up, and we wanted to keep playing. And we ended up playing 14 innings that game, and you guys beat us on a walk in the bottom of the 14th inning. Do you remember that?
That was one of those stories that maybe has left me, but it sounds familiar. And I remember the dust up, but I don't remember how it ended.
Yeah.
Wow.
You guys ended up getting us, but it was a good time. But I remember Coach Fetty was one of your assistants at that time.
Yeah.
So and me and Coach always had a good relationship. He's had a big hand at the Middleport Youth League. He umpired a lot of games for us down there for a certain period of time. So I know Coach Fetty really well, and he was a Meigs graduate too. So
there were a lot of tussles between Athens and Meigs in the game of baseball over the years. Been a lot of pretty good games. Surprising.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
We went down to Meigs Dean's senior year. I think it was his senior year. And they had already called off the softball game.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we got to come back anyway. They got to bring a bus. Let's just call this game off too, because it's raining. And they said, the umpire said, we're playing. And I said, so I argued with him. And we played, and they had that really nice turfus on the field, and it was holding up pretty good. But, well, I told the kids, I'm pretty sure the umpire is really hot. So if they throw the ball towards home plate, you better be swinging. We scored 5 runs in the top of the first. We managed to get Meigs out in the bottom of the first with the bases loaded, and they called the game off. But then it's not off. It's just a continuation game. So when we came back, we had 5-0, and that was what the score ended up being, 5-0.
Yeah.
If they just go home, they were just as good as us, but that allowed us to win the league championship, I think. So sometimes umpires are wrong. Right, Coach? Sometimes they're wrong.
Sometimes, huh? We're going to go with the word sometimes.
I'm going to go with sometimes. Right. Sometimes they're right.
That's right.
Sometimes I was wrong.
Well, we're going to press the pause button and suspend this interview right here. And don't you worry, we'll come back next Monday with the second half of this conversation with Coach Gibson, where we talk a lot more youth baseball and particularly baseball in small town communities and what that looked like and what it means to be an athlete in these smaller rural towns, which we know a lot of you who listen to our podcast are from. And so we hope that you've enjoyed this conversation so far. We'll be sure to continue it. Look for it next Monday morning, right in your podcast feed. We hope that you all have a great week and get out on a baseball diamond somewhere and toss the ball a little bit with someone that you love. God bless you. We'll talk to you again.